What's up, everyone? Welcome to the NBA Pick and Pod. My name's Dawson Shine, and I'm your host. And today, we're kicking it off talking about some big stories in the NBA, some big quotes happening, and more court cases. Woo! Yeah, not really. But that's what we're going to kick it off with, and that's Derrick Rose's losing his summary judgment. Derrick Rose actually was in court today, trying to argue to have his case thrown out of court. Now, for anyone who doesn't really understand what happened with his case, I'm going to actually break it down and let you guys know what is this case even about. What did Derrick Rose actually have to go to court for? Well, we're going to start it off going back in time to 2011. This is when this actually happened. So in 2011, this plaintiff, who's going to remain nameless, even in the court case she's going by Jane Doe, met with Derrick Rose, who's the defendant in this case, or one of the three defendants, who at the time was still a famous NBA point guard, actually in the middle of his MVP season. So according to court documents, both of them began casually dating and seeing each other on a regular basis, and the plaintiff did engage in consensual intercourse with Derrick Rose multiple times, but she also repeatedly refused to have group sex with him and his friends, and that's what this court case is really about. So on August 26th, 2013, this is 2 years after they first met, Rose invited the plaintiff, who I'm keeping nameless for her own safety and her own privacy, and the plaintiff's friend, Jessica Groff, to his residence in Beverly Hills. And while waiting for the defendant's driver, who was running a little late, the plaintiff drank a ton of alcohol, including vodka and an entire bottle of red wine, all on the way to his house, Derrick Rose in this case. And then at the residence, plaintiff and Groff were greeted by the three defendants in this case, Derrick Rose and his two friends, who will be known as Hampton and Allen for the rest of this talk, because that's what they are referred to throughout the court documents. And so, after the defendants greeted the plaintiffs at the door, they offered them more drinks, and both women agreed to have drinks with Allen and took several shots of tequila. So obviously they're quite incapacitated by this point, according to court documents. So they drank, they hung out, they had music on, the normal stuff you do when you're hanging out with friends. Then Groff actually spoke with Rose in his bedroom, and supposedly, allegedly, Allen entered the room, demanded that Groff take her clothes off. And then when Groff refused to do so, Allen supposedly yelled, "What are you doing in here for then?" Well, get them out. I'm not going to bother saying everything in this case, of course. As a matter of fact, y'all can effing go home right now. So Groff was ready to go home, and then she said, "Fine, I will leave." But she didn't want to leave without the plaintiff of this court case. Obviously, the plaintiff was severely drunk. She was basically blackout. She stumbled around and at one point, according to the documents, even picked up with her bare hand a burning hot piece of rock from the fire pit for no reason. So you obviously know that she has nothing in her right mind to allow her to consent to any sexual acts. Eventually, plaintiff and Groff got in a cab and left. Now this is where it gets really confusing and convoluted, which is why we have a court case here. The plaintiff arrived at her own apartment, began to text message Derrick Rose. She said, "You need to come to me right now," and then gave him her home address. So Derrick Rose attempted to convince plaintiff to drive back to Beverly Hills. Obviously she refused. She's almost blackout drunk. That's a poor decision to even invite her back. So Rose text messaged, "We're on our way." Now, these text messages are actual court documents. They are actually admissible in court as evidence. So, the plaintiff didn't respond to his message. She vomited and fell asleep on her bed. Obviously, fantastic state of mind. So, around 2:30 a.m., all three defendants, Hampton, Allen, and Derrick Rose himself, arrived at the plaintiff's apartment. And seeing that she wasn't answering the door, Rose and Allen sent the plaintiff text messages, which are actually evidence. "Hello, we outside, and wake your ass up." Now, the plaintiff still did not respond, so instead of going home, they allegedly broke in by finding an open door on the top of the front stairs, getting into the house, and then found the plaintiff incapacitated on her bed. Now, this is where the actual court case comes about. Despite the plaintiff being unable to consent to intercourse, obviously in any way, shape, or form, if she's vomited and passed out on her bed, all three defendants proceeded to have sex with her. Now, the plaintiff can't remember most details of the alleged rape, but she does remember defendants being on top and around her. That's according to court documents. She woke up the next morning believing that she was drugged the night before And then she text messaged and called Rose in an attempt to talk with him throughout the next week, but he became distant and non-responsive and wouldn't speak about this entire case or this entire happening at all. And then, 2 years later, August 26, 2015, the plaintiff filed this action stating the following claims. And I'm going to read you the whole list of claims because there's quite a few of them. 1. Sexual battery in violation of California law. Battery, trespass, conspiracy to trespass, commit rape and battery, violation of civil code, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, violation of the Ralph Act, and declaratory relief. 9 different claims. After the close of discovery, defendants brought this motion forward to try and get this case thrown out of court because they believe, and they're trying to say, that it's a money grab. So obviously, not all the facts are out yet, and so I don't want to pass judgment, hence why I've been saying allegedly, supposedly, and accused of throughout this. But we do have the judge saying that there is enough evidence to go to trial, and so that's where this case is going to be going. So in the coming months, we're going to be seeing whether or not Derrick Rose actually did gang rape this poor woman. Or, on the flip side, if this woman is actually just doing a cash grab because she knows Derrick Rose is obviously rich, famous, and an NBA player. Big contracts, big winnings, if you actually get him in court and win this case. So the question is whether or not he's going to be getting fined, going to be getting this money taken from him and have to settle with this woman, or if she's just lying about this whole thing. There's obviously some parts where it is true, up to the point where he's text messaging her at the door, but we don't know what happened afterwards, and that's where the details matter. So we're going to have to wait to pass judgment, at least in my opinion, because both sides don't have enough evidence at this point to make a judgment call. So it's not like I'm going to pass judgment on Derrick Rose just because he couldn't get the case thrown out of court. It just means there's enough evidence to go to trial. Doesn't mean he's guilty. Nor does it mean he's innocent, though. But by our court standards, he needs to be innocent until proven guilty. And then on the other side, we can't just accuse this poor woman of trying to do a money grab because we don't know. Maybe she was actually traumatized by this. And despite the fact that she may need the money now, doesn't mean this didn't happen. So I'd say we need to hold the pitchforks back for a bit, and then we can continue to pass judgment once this goes to trial. But I definitely think it's an interesting development because it could have been one of the reasons why Derrick Rose was traded from Chicago to New York. The Bulls ownership does not like bad publicity like this, and they probably would not want to deal with Derrick Rose going to trial during a season. That's a difficult thing for a team to deal with, for a player to deal with, and especially for an organization because it can taint the reputation if it goes poorly. I'm not saying it will, but if it does, that's a mess. And he's not playing at a high enough level to be able to afford to deal with that mess anyways. Basically, I'm saying he's not Kobe Bryant back in the early 2000s, if you remember what I mean, of course. So, that's all for Derrick Rose. Next, we're going to be moving on to Phil Jackson. Yes, Phil Jackson, the GM of the New York Knicks. You know, that fantastic team that's somehow still better than the Nets. Somehow. And he came out today actually making the comment saying that the reason why the Knicks could not run a triangle is because today's NBA players do not have the ability to run a triangle offense. With his exact quote in Fast Break today being that today's players simply lack the skills to play the triangle. They know how to play one-on-one, catch and shoot, and they've mastered crossover dribbles, spins, playing off of screens, and step-back shots. They don't know how to execute things like inside reverse pivots and other basic footwork. They have no sense of timing or organization. They don't really know how to play 5-on-5 basketball. It's strictly generational. So what he's saying basically is that players have mastered a lot of the one-on-one moves and abilities that get you noticed and get you scouted. So if you're an AAU or if you're in a high school team or a college team, the moves that he's saying players know these days, like shooting off of a screen, spinning into a jump shot, turnaround, step backs, crossovers, those are the flashy moves, you know, the Kyrie Irvings of moves or Steph Curry, where it gets you noticed by scouts and gets you into the NBA nowadays. It's not the basic footwork, the good defensive stance, or the good passing in an offense, even if you don't get assists. So just the good distribution of the ball and good footwork in the post. Now, I'm not sure exactly if I agree with everything he's saying, but there is definitely more of an emphasis on shooting, on step backs, on step backs, that kind of thing, where basically players, all they want to do is shoot the three, get the crossover, and have good moves. And it does lead to poor footwork. If you look at players like Kobe Bryant, when he was getting better and better and better, the reason why was because his footwork improved almost every season of his prime. His footwork is some of the best in the NBA. Or if you look way back to the big men with great footwork. Even Shaquille O'Neal had fantastic footwork. Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing. You don't have those kind of great footwork, big post players anymore. You have DeAndre Jordans. You have Dwight Howards. You have Hassan Whitesides, who have great leaping ability, who have great dunking. They can't use their footwork to have great post moves. That's very rare in today's NBA. So he's saying that's the reason why the triangle offense, which is the reason why he's won 11 championships as a coach, with Michael Jordan and then with Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, and them. He's saying that the reason why they can't run the offense that worked then is because the players nowadays just don't have the ability to. I don't know if that's entirely true, because you do see some teams, like the Cavaliers before the last couple of games of the finals, or even the Warriors during their season when Steph doesn't have to carry them, or even the Spurs especially, where they have great ball movement and they have the ability to get open using good passing and timing. But that's not the majority of the NBA. The majority of the NBA resorts to isolation basketball, especially when it's time to really get a clutch bucket. It's inefficient, but it's also what a lot of players are comfortable with. Look like what happened in the NBA Finals, Game 5, 6, and 7. Whenever the Cavaliers needed a bucket, when they had their backs against the walls, instead of passing the ball around looking for an open shot, you know what they did? They went to Kyrie Irving or LeBron James. They got them a switch onto Steph Curry as a defender using screens, and then they went to work in isolation basketball. Now, that's not saying that's bad basketball, because guess what? It won them a championship, and it's winning basketball. It's just not triangle basketball. So I don't know if Phil Jackson's right saying that they simply lack the skills to play a triangle, but more so that they just have better abilities and other skills that allow them to win more often. These isolation skills are hugely important, especially in end-of-game scenarios when you need to get a bucket and the entire defense of the opposing team is locked in. So passing the ball to get an open shot is much harder to do. Creating your own shot, much easier as long as you can make it. So although he may be right about the NBA not having this much emphasis on what he's talking about, especially footwork and timing, I still think that there's a lot of skill in the NBA, even with what he's thinking. There are still some players who have great pivot feet, great footwork in the post. They're just not as utilized because they're not as important when the three-point shot is so heavily utilized. You never know. Maybe if the three-point shot becomes too big and small ball becomes the norm, one team's going to come out there with a generational big man who has great footwork and dominate them because he's much bigger than everyone else. If that happens, you'll see teams start to swing back around to playing bigger. It's just what happens with the NBA. The way to play changes as time changes. So we'll see how it changes in the future coming years, but I think it's definitely an interesting point to make, especially from someone who's seen the triangle and run the triangle so successfully in the past, failing to do so with today's players. But that's all I got today, folks. If you did enjoy, leave a like or subscribe. If you've made it this far, write down in the comments who you think will be the next 60-point game scorer in the NBA next season. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and then I'll give you mine next episode. So tell me in the comments who you think will score 60 points in a game, and I'll catch you next time. Have a great day.